In this video, it is the Vanquish stance and what people claim is the best mod you can do to it, which is the Stubby motor kit. What this does is it moves the motor placement back a little bit, assuming you have a smaller outrunner, and changes the location of the servo from on top of the axle to behind it, all in one little kit. So we're going to do some baseline testing of the stance first, swap all this over, and then see is it actually better or not? One of the first baselines I want to do is weight of the truck, and I'm not really concerned about the total weight because I don't think this kit's going to make that much a difference total, but I'm wondering about the front rear balance and how much is on that front axle. So as it sits right here, this is about 1457, 58% on the front axle, 2528 total, 1070, 42% on the rear. So I don't think we're going to be really doing anything that's going to impact the rear that much, except for moving some stuff a little bit off the front. But that 1457, I like my front weight bias when it comes to crawlers, 58%. I don't really want that to go down very much, and I am concerned with moving that motor rearward and that servo rearward. Will we change this number appreciably? So let's keep an eye on that. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is Roadside RC. You'll tend to find me bashing or crawling or drifting or racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos. Let's get back into it here, but if you enjoy this and if this is helpful for you, let me know down in the comments. I appreciate it. This next baseline is rather simple. How steep of an angle can the truck climb up, and do we make any noticeable change to that with this? To install this kit, powered screwdriver is really useful. 1.5 to 2.5 millimeter speed tips, a box end wrench, a scale for measuring the lengths, zip ties, needle nose pliers, and all double-sided tape, a manual driver, as well as some thread locks. Now in the kit itself, we have a set of instructions, which are going to be super useful for us, and a whole bunch of little parts from different skids to different standoffs, everything that we need to take where this motor mounts right now and move it physically back where this servo mounts right now and put it behind that front axle. And then we need to have the shorter skid here to modify with that motor moving back. Now the instructions show us working with the servo first and taking that off and modifying that piece over. It also shows it with the whole front axle out of the vehicle, which means we'd have to take the lower shock mounts loose, the wheels off, we'd have to take the lower and upper links off. And here's the truth, I don't want to have to take all of that stuff off. So we're going to see if we can do it just a little bit easier by taking it and the motor and transmission all out together. And then does that give us enough room to get the new servo mounted in where we want it to? We're going to start this by taking the servo horn off, and then we're going to take the 4 screws off to mount the servo. In order to get the rest of the servo on axle mount pieces off, there's 1, 2, 3 2mm screws here on the back. If you don't have the axle off, you want to be very careful making sure that you're getting straight on those screws as you're taking them out. You don't want to strip it. You may want to use not an electronic driver like this. It's nice and thick. You may want to use a smaller one or one with a ball tip on it to help you get in there to those specifically. Oh, I didn't notice it, but those upper link mounts actually go through there as well. You just barely get in there. Underneath the spring, you can get to that screw. Now, instead of going ahead and continuing the servo swap, I'm going to go ahead and jump over and grab the whole transmission motor and everything and get all of that out of here. To do that, we're using the 2.5 millimeter driver. There's 1, 2, 3 screws over here that hold the transmission down. Swapping back to the 2 millimeter, we're going to take these 2 screws out right here on either side. And then on the bottom side here, we're going to go ahead and take this 1 screw loose up here at the front. And just while we're here, we're going to go ahead and take these other 2 screws as well, because we're going to be replacing this skid plate. And so I went ahead and undid all the zip ties so I could get the whole transmission just absolutely free and clear. Now we can turn our attention back to trying to get that new servo mount all pushed up there. These are the two parts you're now going to be looking for from the new kit. This is the new servo mount, and then this is an additional bracket. You do have to use 2 screws to bolt them together, but it's very important here as I'm looking at it. You have to bolt this piece to the axle first, because what I was about to do was go ahead and just bolt it out here because it's right in front of me. Why would I not go ahead and put these 2 screws in? Why would I not go ahead and put these 2 screws in? Well, that's because this screw is going to have to go right past where that is. So step 1 is this right here. We need 2 M3 by 15 millimeter screws. The kit does come with some screws itself, of course, that you can use. You can also be reusing some of the ones that came out. If you're looking to make sure that you're using the right screw, the 15 millimeters that they're referring to is underneath the head. So you can look like this. That is a 10 millimeter screw. Now, it doesn't actually clearly say in the instructions, but based on what I can tell right here, these 2 screws that are on the side of the pumpkin, those are actually the 2 that we want in order to mount this underneath here. But what's interesting is in the screws provided, there's no 15 millimeter screws. All right, there we go. Bolted in. I used 15 millimeter that had already taken out of the front axle, along with another one stolen from my spare parts bin. And so then now that is there. We have this other piece that bolts in something like this going into the front of the car. 2 M3 screws going into the bottom initially to hold it, plus an M3 by 10, plus an M3 by 10 here, and then it wants a 15 right up here, so we're gonna have to make sure we get all those in there right. There we go, looking great. So screw back into this upper link, screw back into this upper link, all of those are there. We're ready to mount that servo back in there. Now, as we mount this back in, the instructions actually show going ahead and already having the servo horn mounted to the servo, which I think is a really bad idea as it turns out, because you don't know if you've actually bumped or moved that servo at all. You don't want to do that until you have it powered on and you know that that servo is centered. So what we're first going to do is just screw all this back together. Since we're moving the servo, this linkage now needs to be a slightly different length. It looks like from the factory mine was set up at about 49 millimeters end to end, and then it wants it to now be 50. So we're going to see what about a 1 revolution, and now that's 50 millimeters. You're also going to end up with it flat to each other, and then that's how you're going to get that over to the servo, just like this. With your controller on, you now can go ahead and plug in a battery. Your ESC will still fire up, and since I have my ESC still connected to my receiver, still connected to my servo, the servo still works. And so then that way we can make sure that our steering trim is actually at 0, and then we can mount that servo horn. And this is one of the only times so far in which we are putting a metal screw into a piece of metal, and so I would highly suggest using a little bit of Loctite on that servo horn. And with all that done, we can now confirm that the servo still works as expected. And if you want to, you can double check your servo endpoints, which looks like they have not changed at all, so that's a good thing. It looks like the total servo throw is still the same. It's just now in that different position. So now we're coming back to the motor and transmission situation here. So we need to take the screw off of either side here to get the motor mount out. This cover is going to come off. I'm going to use a 1.5 millimeter driver to take these 4 screws off of this cover. 2.5 millimeter driver to take this screw and this one out, plus these 2 screws right here below it. And these 3 more to separate the whole transmission case. I'll be danged. They sure do make this a whole lot more complicated than you think it should need to be. It's a 2 millimeter set screw here on the drive shaft, and then that allows this whole piece to come loose. I'm going to transfer it over here to the other gear case, and then that way there's no question about me losing any of the bearings or anything, or the orientation. Keep everything nice and together. A little pair of needle nose will grab this pin. Piece right here I think will come loose. And now you can get to the 2 millimeter screw down here. That's the one that we were needing. In order to finally split this case, we need our normal cross wrench, and we're gonna not have anything that fits that. Okay, little spur gear holder slides off, cross pin comes out with it, and then aha, old shaft is out, finally, and we need this shaft to come out along with it right here, and the electronics board comes out. Sheesh, that was a lot. We're going to start with these two little fancy Vanquish aluminum posts. Those are going to go in those two standoffs that we just took off. Again, if you want to, this is a good opportunity for some thread locker. The other one goes over here where we took that other shaft out. In place of our bigger shaft that we had before, we now have this one. So watch that little spacer that's on there as you take it off. So bearing and the spacer go on there. It should be the same dimensions as the old one, but you can see how much we're moving everything back. So that slides through there, and then we can go ahead and start reassembling the parts that we had before. So the little cross pin goes in, this part goes right on it there. Can reassemble the gear. I'll go ahead and put this nut back on. Okay, nice and tight. There's no slipper there, so you're just screwing everything in nice and tight. Okay, and now we're going to jump back across to this side where you see those two go in. We can use our little awl to push the bearing back in. We can slide that cross pin in and set this gear back down on top of it. Alright, look at that. We're making progress. We have things back together a little bit. This slides on here. Go ahead and get this screw in. And I'll tell you what, I may go ahead put two of these bigger screws in here as well. That'll help hold all this steady. There we go. So now we have the motor set up. Gears are spinning. It's good to check that as you go through. Make sure everything looks like it's clamping together. That bearing plate on there. We have the small cross pin that goes in here. We can drop this gear on. Looking good. And then this whole case should be able to slide back together. Getting all the things lined up. Hey, look at that. And we can hit a couple more of these screws. Now if we spin the motor, everything else spins. We can spin backwards. Everything else spins. We need to go ahead and get our drive shaft on this side now. I have this cover just setting on here for now, but look at that. We have a whole complete center transmission unit again. Turn our attention back over here. The kit comes with a shorter skid right here. So we're going to want to take the screws from the one that we had before and stick the two in here at least at first. Because we're shortening everything up here, we need a new motor mount here kind of with the chassis brace, and it looks like it's just going to fit in about like this. Pretty easy. Couple screws right back in there like they had it before. It looks like this also gives you additional screws back here. Unfortunately, they're right behind the shocks, so you'd have to take the shocks off. I don't know why we would need those necessarily. So I think I'm honestly going to skip them and just put the factory screws back in. Now ready to bolt the transmission all back in. And then you can use all the screws that you had before, the 3 here, and then the 2 other screws here to bolt everything together. Don't forget your one little center screw here. And the instructions mention nothing about this, but we lost our little electronics mounting tray here. So as near as I can tell, just looking around, these 2 holes line up right in here at the front of our new mount. Right there. And it's just the right space to mount up this. Now the only thing left to do is plug everything back in, wire tie some stuff up, and make all this mess not look like such a mess. I think some of the things that I'm going to really want to watch for here is this servo wire. You don't really want the servo wire being the lowest thing dangling on your vehicle, so I'm going to want to pull it up nice and tight. And there we are. Everything is neater, at least. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's neater. I was messing with this, and I did notice one thing that the instructions wanted me to do differently. The instructions actually want you to disconnect this drag link right here to the servo horn, and they actually want you to screw it in from the bottom. That would definitely make that a little bit straighter. What's interesting is I don't see where it would cause an issue right now. The horn does not interfere with that link either direction, and all my steering settings and everything are just right. So I actually have no issue with it as it sits right now. It did provide different links, and then I realized where my mistake was. So when it said to make a 50mm link, I made it from inside to inside here. I believe they provide the shorter link because they want you to make it from eye to eye 50mm long, because if you do mount it to the underside of the servo horn here, it's going to need to be shorter just because it's traveling a less distance. It's not on that angle. So if you are doing this and you want to consider mounting it to the bottom there, then you're going to need to assemble the link, which they do provide you with the link, the balls, the rod ends, all that kind of stuff that you would need. All right, now moment of truth with this all together. We are now at 1427. So that's about 30 grams that we took off the front. And when you look at the rear, that is 1098, which is up about almost 30 grams. So we took about 30 off the front and we added it to the rear. I'd be dang. 25 means that we're just down about 3 grams total, but we actually moved it from 58 to 57%, from 42 to 43. So in theory, why in the heck did I just do that? Why in the heck did I just take 30 grams off the front and move it to the rear? Yes, a little bit of that weight you can claim with the servo now is down lower, but look at this also. Look at how, I don't know if you can really see it in there. Look at how deep that servo is in there now. Like, I'm gonna have to get a low profile servo in there, otherwise the servo is gonna be hitting absolutely everything. So if I don't swap that servo out with a low profile one, then it's currently the lowest thing on the frickin' front axle, and that's probably not a good thing. Put the board right back on the same mark that it was before, where the truck went up, and let's see what happens. Okay, so let's be very, very clear here. You spend a noticeable sum of money for this whole conversion kit, and it makes your truck worse, puts the weight where it shouldn't be, and makes it climb worse. I just spent an hour plus going through this and converting this over to this kit, and now I'm going to undo it. I'm going to literally take it off and put all the factory bits right back on, because it was better. It was better with the motor in the front and the servo on top of the axle instead of behind it. It gets you more clearance. It has 30 grams total more weight on the front axle versus the rear axle. So on that bombshell, if you are considering buying the Vanquish Stubby conversion kit, don't. Save your money. Just don't do it. You don't need it. It's a waste of your money, and it makes your truck worse. So if you're curious about anything else that I've done with this Vanquish stance on this bombshell, then there'll be a playlist popping up over here to your right of all the other things that I've done. I hope you found this useful. If you have, let me know down in the comments. If you have used this kit and you love it, let me know down below also why you think this is better, because I see no reason